What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Recently, one of the very first so-called special military operation manuals that was developed in Russia back in 2022 appeared online. Originally, it was meant to be only seen by the participants of the invasion and those who were closely related to this monstrosity. But either through a leak or due to a passing of almost 3 years, this manual found its way on the internet. And as you guys all know, once something appears on the internet, it is impossible to remove it from there. And today, most likely for the very first time ever, the Western audience, you guys together with me, will be able to go through this manual as well. You will see how the Kremlin's narrative about Ukraine was twisted, turned, reversed, and somehow managed to exist in multiple contradictory versions all at once. It is not exactly a brand new phenomenon, but it's gotten so blatant recently that even the most loyal TV personalities seem to choke on their own words. What's funny is that these contradictory ideas don't replace one another, no. They just keep layering up in the same space until we cannot tell which one is the main message anymore. So, let's try to understand the ridiculousness of the state narrative, what exactly Putin wanted to achieve with this invasion, at least according to his vision back in 2022, and see how it all changed several years later. When this war first started, the Kremlin repeated a polished script about Ukraine being a brother nation that needed rescue from Nazi junkies and especially from that clown Zelensky. The tone was demeaning, as if Ukrainians could not figure out for themselves how to live without alleged Russian guidance. It almost felt like, after listening to Russian propaganda for several days, that Ukrainians were so stupid to allow the Western ideologies to penetrate their minds, adopt European culture, and praise American lifestyle. Like, you used to be a part of the great USSR, why did you suddenly become so liberal and free-thinking? That's absurd! But don't worry, we, Russians, we will never forget our brothers and sisters. We are coming to your aid to rescue you from this rainbow grip of the West. Not long after that, the official line changed to something else entirely. Oops, there is no Ukrainian nation to begin with. You guys have an artificial country with imaginary borders, which were created after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Your territories were given to you, not earned by you. So don't be surprised if we come to reclaim some parts of your land. The very first logical question appears. If Ukraine and Ukrainians do not exist, who exactly is Putin rescuing? Then a new storyline took shape. All Ukrainians must be wiped out. A direct call for genocide against a people who just a minute ago before, did not exist at all. Strange, right? But wait, there is more. Because these contradictory ideas coexist in the same media sphere. The shifting in intensity of one or the other depends from day to day. On Monday, Ukraine is the brother nation. On Wednesday, poor Ukrainians allowed themselves to be captured by Americans. And on Friday, the entire country is a myth and its people should not exist. Rinse and repeat for 3 years. Sometimes you hear more open calls to wipe entire Ukrainian cities off the map. Then, in a moment of bizarre nostalgia, someone on TV mentions brotherhood again. You can see how this confuses even the most dedicated propagandists. Take Vladimir Slavyev, for example. One moment he is hailing Russian forces for reducing Ukrainian cities to ash and rubble, practically salivating over images of destroyed buildings. Next thing you know, the same man is dreamily claiming that Russian troops never target civilians. In under 24 hours he might say, we never fight civilians, and also we absolutely need to find the civilians, because you never know which one of them will take arms against Russian liberators the very next day. You can clearly see how difficult it is to maintain 3 different narratives at least at the same time, while still sounding extremely convinced that the truth you are saying is one and only acceptable reality. The very same anchor who scolded Israel for bombing Gaza turned around a few months later and praised the devastation of Vovchansk in eastern Ukraine. Perhaps he forgot that praising one atrocity while condemning another has a very big stench of hypocrisy. Or maybe he believes the audience will not notice, thinking that regular Russian people are stupid. Well, sad to inform you, Senor Slavyev, we are not stupid. Of course, it is not just the TV shows that highlight this mental chaos. Propaganda brochures are being dropped into the trenches, in the rear, and even in Russian cities, far behind the front lines, aiming to guide new recruits, civilians, or anyone curious enough to flip through the pages. These pamphlets reference to demilitarization, denazification, and other fancy words that promise a big, grand cause. But if you read them, you realize they are entirely inconsistent. One page says Russians and Ukrainians are literally the same people, supported by scientific, whatever it means, claims. And by the way, think about the last time when a country said that some races are the same while others are different, based on some sort of scientific research. Which country was it? Yeah. Another page insists Ukraine never existed as an independent nation and is basically just an anti-Russian plot of land, which sovereignty is protected by its masters from NATO. Then you will see calls to erase every last trace of that anti-Russian existence from the very face of the earth. And ironically, the brochures even borrow from Greek terms like laos to define the people, probably to sound more intellectual. Because if they don't, people will immediately recognize them for what they truly are, some twisted mind joke and delusion. The text then does a wild pivot and starts lecturing on how the war in Ukraine is about saving Europe from a nuclear doom. It's quite a leap, but apparently the idea is that Russia initiated a special military operation to spare the poor Europeans from an apocalyptic clash of civilizations. The logic behind it: there is a land civilization and a maritime civilization, like, I guess, fish and nagas. And if they meet, nuclear war erupts, which would annihilate Europe. If you have no idea how these things are related or how these conclusions were made, don't worry, you are not the only one. So, in the end, if you think the war is about seizing territories or building up a sphere of influence, guess again. According to these authors, it's about heroically saving the European Union from a meltdown while also flattening Ukrainian cities. As simple as that. The origins of all this ridiculousness comes from the very first manual about special military operation back from 2022, which talks about what is even Ukraine, why special military operation and not a war, de-Ukrainization, why Russia is allowed to Ukraine, and much, much more of similar degrading and mostly funny statements and justifications. If you want to have a good laugh, it is definitely worth a read. Yes, it is in Russian, but luckily I am the Russian dude, so I fluently speak this language. I translated all of it into English and uploaded to my Patreon. Please go ahead and check it, the link is down below. It is outrageously funny and concerning, to be honest, at the same time, because there are so many parallels with one very bad person from 20th century and his ideas of Russia's superiority. Replacing words Russia and Ukraine with some other European countries, and it almost feels like you are reading something what should have never existed in the first place. So yeah, the translated version is on my Patreon. Welcome all the new members, and thank you so much, guys, for your support of my work. What is left for anyone outside this madness to believe? The so-called special military operation has dragged on for 3 years almost, morphing from a promise of protecting Russians in eastern Ukraine to a scorched earth reality. Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Marinka, and most recently Vuhledar is an example. It's a city that once had 15,000 residents. By the time the Russian, or I would say Putin's army declared it liberated, guess how many people are left? 116 people were left. The rest, gone, killed and displaced. This pattern has played out in one place after another. The city is taken by the people who once lived there have either fled or lost their lives. Meanwhile, the brochures keep preaching that the Russians have saved, quote-unquote, these towns from annihilation. The people left behind might beg to differ, as they walk through rubble, not having access to electricity or running water, praying they do not get shelled once again. On TV, you still hear how these Russian-speaking cities that obviously want to rejoin the motherland. Yet, if they want to truly be liberated so badly, why is it the entire blocks are now ghosts of what they used to be? The soldier in the trench gets fed a propaganda cake, explaining how it is necessary and unavoidable to inflict a bit of collateral damage because all those Ukrainians are either Nazi sympathizers or silent collaborators. One moment they claim there is no such thing as Ukraine, and in the next they warn that if Russians do not act, these so-called non-existent Ukrainians will exterminate them completely. The mental acrobatics are absolutely unbelievable. Who would believe such a narrative, you would think, and yet some people do believe. You ask them directly, why yesterday Solovyov said one thing and today he's saying completely the opposite thing, and the response almost all the time would be hatred and toxicity, saying that you're not a real Russian, you're not a patriot of your country, and you're paid to say these things by your American puppeteers. That is a true story. You try reasoning with such people, it only makes them more convinced in their own reality that much more. Let's get one thing clear. All these contradictory stories, Ukraine must be liberated, Ukraine does not exist, Ukrainians are Russians, Ukrainians must be wiped out, they're not just some random confusion. They are a part of a larger spread of a fascist ideology that denies people's right to self-determine, all while cloaking itself in talk of heroic crusades and divine mission statements. The authors of these brochures say they are saving Russians from genocide, yet in reality they have created a genocide of their own making, turning entire cities of eastern Ukraine into rubble. Their writing brags about vengeance, calls for smashing former Ukraine, and insists that God is on their side. It is reminiscent of the Gott mit uns inscriptions that German soldiers wore decades ago. Such texts are openly printed and distributed by universities in Russia, with no outrage or condemnation by the authorities. Places which used to research some actually beneficial for humanity topics are now focusing on proving that Ukrainian Slavs are not like Russian Slavs, and therefore should be either eliminated or taken under control. That is me putting things as simple and as plain as possible. How much more proof, guys, you need to see that the exact similarities between the regime of Putin and Nazistic Germany. The disclaimers about Ukrainianism and their readiness to kill any Ukrainian who refuses to label themselves as Little Russians reveals a brand of extreme nationalism that has fueled the fires of war for almost 3 years. It is the sort of propaganda that might have once circulated underground, but now it is out there in the open. And while it is easy to label such nonsense as deranged or delusional, it is driving real armies, real bombings, and real lives are lost in the process. Not hundreds or thousands, but hundreds of thousands at this point. It is not just an intellectual exercise in hypocrisy. It is the reason many Russian and Ukrainian families have spent 3 straight New Year Eves without their fathers or sons. Missiles and bullets here is what brings war into reality, but it is the words and ideas that maintain the entire foundation of this conflict. Well, there you have it, guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. If you wish to read this ridiculously outrageous 2022 manual about special military operation, translated in English, it is on my Patreon, the link is down below. Thanks so much for watching, see you tomorrow.
We won't succumb to their tricks, the facade they try to sell, their twisted words and feeble claims on us all they cannot quell. We see through their lies, their feeble attempts to sway. We do not believe in ridiculous Russian propaganda.